Allen Stiles
on Sactown Sports.
Oh, Kyle, you're lucky. You are lucky Chris Biderman of the Sac Bee is joining us because I forgot. This song is going. Aiden O'Connell just got named QB2. We're having a good Friday, and here we are.
We're in love, Alan. It's Friday. I'm in love.
We're not. 916-329-1140. Let's run the giveaway real quick. Mike Epps. Go see Mike Epps December 5th at Hard Rock Live. Lucky caller number. Chris, we got you. You want to give us a lucky number?
Let's go 21.
Well, that's too high. Be under 5.
4.
Caller number 4.
Or 21.
Or 21.
If 4 doesn't pick up 21.
916-339-1140 to go see Mike Epps. Your last chance, caller number 4, 916-339-1140. Chris Biderman joins us of the Sac Bee. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. I know you just landed not too long ago. 2 places I've never been. I've never been to Tennessee. I've been to the Denver airport, but I don't really count that. And now you're in Denver as the Kings hope to end an 8-game losing streak. You were, of course, in the building, Chris. We've been promoting your article on the Bee all show long because it's incredible. How were the vibes last night, Chris, just as a whole?
Vibes weren't great. DeMar DeRozan in particular, and he wears his emotions on his sleeve, I think, probably as much as anybody on the roster. But the vibes certainly weren't great. I think it's a situation, and we probably should have seen this coming into the season, but when you have a team full of veterans and it's pretty clear that the writing's on the wall in terms of their limited futures with the team, like these guys know that they're probably not going to be around for the long haul.
Yeah.
And I think, you mix that with a first-year coach, and it's not a good mix right now. And so I would say the buy-in's not entirely there. I would say the coaching staff is probably not putting these guys in position to succeed or at least maximize them. I think the players are seeing that. I think, this is sort of the product of Vivek Ranadive making the decisions he made last year to fire Mike Brown and trade De'Aaron Fox for Zach LaVine. So I think you look at, like nobody's blameless. I think you look at all 4 levels of the organization from, ownership to general manager to coaching to players. I think you can find fingerprints from everybody on this. I'm very curious to see how this proceeds, because I don't think Scott Perry went into this naive. I think he understood that this team was going to need to get remade at some point towards building a sustainable winner. But in the meantime, if he knows it, then the players have to know it. And how do you get buy-in from the players in a scenario like that? The Kings clearly aren't. So I think that's kind of what we're seeing. This is a product of just, I think, a dysfunctional situation up and down the organization.
Talking to Chris Biderman of the Sac Bee. Be sure to check out all of his articles, but his newest article, as he had a good conversation with DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine, which we will get to. But I want to take a second, Chris, because we noticed something last night with Doug. We played some of his post-game presser and then asked the question, does this sound like a team that and maybe it does, but does this sound like a team that lost their 8th straight? They're touching franchise records at this point, and they got 40-pieced by the G League Grizzlies team by Santi Aldama and Jock Landale, and he sounded meek. And for lack of a better term, he almost sounded broken. But Sam Amick, who we've had on the morning show, said Doug needs to change his approach maybe, and enough with the pride stuff and, you got to earn your respect. It felt like yesterday Doug was premiering a new version of him where, to your point, we all know that this thing has a timeline. And, hey, I'm just going to focus on the young guys because clearly the vets, what I'm saying hasn't been resonating. How did it sound last night, or how did it feel? Did it feel like Doug was deciding almost to go in a different direction now, looking at their 8th loss in a row?
Yeah, I asked him that question, like what changed, for him in terms of using a different tone last night versus the previous week against the Atlanta Hawks, right? Where after that game, he called out the shameful compete level, to use his words. And last night he was very much like, yeah, this is just kind of part of the process. So I asked him about, his sort of change in tone, and he said that, you just can't go down that rabbit hole as often, which to me, like, that reads, this is just me speculating, but somebody or multiple people within the organization had a conversation with Doug, like, it's not sustainable to rip your team after every single loss, because there are probably going to be a lot of losses that look like, what happened in Atlanta and to a further extent last night in Memphis. So I think Doug has sort of had a reset in his mindset in terms of how this season is going to play out, and that, they might lose a lot of games, and they might end up trading some of these guys and positioning for draft positioning. And like, that might be what they ultimately decide to do, in which case Doug can't be, pedal to the metal at all times when it comes to intensity and compete level, when some of these guys might not be there for the remainder of the season. So yeah, I think it was definitely notable. And I think it just sort of speaks to just kind of this weird disconnect throughout, even going back to training camp, like Doug Christie talking about defense and competing, and it's like, this is not a roster with guys who are capable of playing the brand that you want to play. So why would you be surprised that you're not going to get great results, particularly on the defensive end? Meanwhile, the offense is also a mess. I asked Doug Christie a question about the offense a week ago, and he basically said, yeah, it's not, I don't care about the offense. It's not, this isn't an offensive issue. And it's like, well, it's still half the game. Like, I'm a believer in, needing defense as much as anybody. The defense has clearly been the Kings' biggest issue, even dating back to when Mike Brown was here. But when the offense is in, the bottom 4 or 5 in the league, and you have these type of offensive players, you have to look at that and look at what you're doing. And even last night, it's like, there are no easy shots for these guys. Everything is, they're pounding the air out of the ball. They're not cutting. Nobody's getting easy looks. Everything is just out of one-on-one creation. And it's clearly not sustainable, even when you have good one-on-one scorers. So I just think, going back to training camp, the messaging, the picking up 94 feet, it's like, man, Domantas Sabonis, DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, these guys are not guys who are going to pick up 94 feet or who you even want doing that. So there's just been like a steady disconnect throughout each level, it feels like. And what we're seeing is sort of the results of that on the floor.
Talking to Chris Biderman of the Sac Bee. Be sure to check out all of his work, specifically what he just dropped from last night's game as the Kings dropped their 8th in a row. As we talked about the guys that have been sitting and not playing and where things are going in the future, Chris, one of the guys that we are more so sure is going to be on the team next season, maybe mostly because of his contract, is Zach LaVine. And Zach LaVine, you're looking at a team that's 3-13. He's making $40 whatever million, and he's being sat in the 4th in games that are close enough. Doesn't make a ton of sense, and I get it. Doug is looking for something. You spoke with Zach LaVine, and he had a lot to say. That's really what spoke to me in this article. Obviously, the DeMar stuff was great too, but I've been really hard on Zach LaVine. I think a lot of people have been. He had the back thing. He hasn't been taking a ton of shots. What you got out of him yesterday, it felt like the first time I had heard him be as transparent as he was when he discusses the shot taking and things like that. And the fact that he is coming off the bench for the first time in his career feels like he's the one guy, especially with Domantas Sabonis out. You can't move Keegan Murray this season anyway. Feels like he's the one guy that you probably can't bench right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would think so. It was interesting to talk to him about it, because, he said, we're not doing it right if I'm only getting 8 to 10 shots. And at the same time, it's kind of like, well, you play a role in that. Like, you can go get your shots. But I think it also speaks to just the lack of spacing that they've had. That's kind of the other thing that I think doesn't get discussed enough with this Kings team, is with Keegan Murray out and the fact that they don't have any other real like two-way wings. Everyone's playing out of position, including Zach LaVine. Like, a lot of times it's been, three-point guard sized guys and Zach LaVine at the 4 in a bunch of these lineups. And it's like, it's just that's not optimizing, Zach LaVine at all. And that's not to make excuses for him, but I think it's just part of the reason why some of these guys aren't playing well is because they're not in the proper role. And I think that comes down to roster construction. It comes down to coaching. But for Zach LaVine specifically, he hasn't been aggressive in all of these games. Last night, he was super aggressive.
Yeah.
Like I was sitting, at the box score behind the scorers table, and Zach LaVine was playing really, really hard. It seemed like even on both sides. And, basically what he said was like, I have to be shooting more. And Doug, I understand Doug wanting to, push whatever buttons he can to help this team win. But I think I can do that too. I think I can help this team win. And for whatever reason, he's had a pretty short leash with Zach. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if he's trying to send a message. I'm not sure, exactly what's going on there in Doug's mind. Doug's kind of played it off like it's not a big deal. But Zach straight up told me last night, he's like, I don't like it. Like, I think I should be playing in the fourth quarter, and I think I could help this team win better than anybody. So at some point, the ball's got to be in Zach's court, and Zach probably needs to just say, screw it. I'm gonna take 12 shots in a fourth quarter, and I'm gonna try to score 20 points in the fourth quarter and just put this offense on my back because no one else is doing it. And I think that's kind of what Doug wants him to do. But there's sort of this weird, chicken or egg thing when it comes to the coaching staff and Zach LaVine's aggressiveness. And it's just kind of in a weird point right now. And I don't think Zach's at all happy with it. Mm-hmm. And I think he was pretty diplomatic to me about it. But it'll be really interesting to see what happens from here on out, because if the Kings are going to trade Zach LaVine, or at least try to, they need to maximize his value and, get him to averaging 25, 30 a game, shooting, at a high percentage from three. And right now, if Zach LaVine's sitting in the fourth quarter, you definitely are minimizing his trade value.
Talking to Chris Biderman of the Sac Bee, and one of the reasons we maybe thought they could be able to do something this season and, just 8 seed, something like that, is because all we heard over the summer was point guard, point guard, point guard. Chris, it seems like the most Sacramento Kings thing ever. I saw last night, no, they need a specific Lonzo Ball type of point guard. They go from having no point guards to 2 point guards and Russell Westbrook and Dennis Schroeder, and still somehow do not have the correct type of point guard that this team specifically needs, according to certain people throughout the league. Do you buy that with the point guard stuff? Or are we just to the point where this team just doesn't make sense? Because now it turns into, well, Dennis Schroeder isn't the right type of point guard. Dennis Schroeder has been benched for Russell Westbrook. The Russell Westbrook thing feels like the shine is a little bit off of it. It was really fun at the beginning when they were beating the Warriors G League team. But now all of a sudden he's out there. He's not terrible. He's just Russell Westbrook. How did they bungle this point guard situation and the idea that everything that you're talking about in setting up Zach LaVine, even DeMar DeRozan, that was that we heard at training camp, no, it's Dennis Schroeder. He's playing great. He's the FIBA champion. Then they get Russell Westbrook, and he was playing great early, but it's Russ, and it's a very acquired taste, if you will. I just don't know what to make of how we went from no point guards to 2, but they still don't have the right point guard. And then all around the league, there's a bunch of 6'7" dudes who are Denny Avdias that handle the basketball anyway.
Yeah, I think it's a spacing issue, ultimately. Mm-hmm. Like, I think given the players that you're relying on to carry the offense, you need to give them space. You need DeMar DeRozan to have room to operate. And when you're playing Russell Westbrook, who's not a good three-point shooter, and when you're playing Dennis Schroeder, who's also not a good three-point shooter, teams can pack the paint and they can pack the mid-range area, which is where DeMar has typically thrived. But when there's no spacing and teams are basically asking these point guards to shoot threes, then that makes DeMar DeRozan's life a lot more difficult, on top of the fact that DeMar DeRozan is getting guarded by power forwards.
Yeah.
And that makes it a lot more difficult for him to go down to the block and go to the mid-range and get his shots where he typically does. So I think it's a spacing issue. And this was probably the biggest thing, on top of defensive versatility with Keegan Murray's, absence, is that you just don't have enough floor spacers. The Kings have been playing predominantly with one reliable 3-point shooter in Zach LaVine in the starting lineup. And, like that's just not how the NBA works. Like a lot of teams are playing 4 out minimum. A lot of teams have stretch 5s and they're playing 5 out. And that's just the way, pace and space. Like the Kings don't have any space because they don't have any 3-point shooting. And when they signed Dennis Schroeder, it's like, okay, great. But he's another guy who's kind of a first point guard.
Mm-hmm.
And a first point guard doesn't really work when you have Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan, who are guys who want to score with the ball in their hands and not cut a whole lot, or not, Zach can space it, but Zach's not a cutter. But like they just don't. The spacing has always been the issue with the offense, on top of a lack of movement. And to me, when you're looking at the point guard position, you need a spacer. You need somebody who doesn't necessarily need to have the ball in his hands the entire time, because these other guys are going to get buckets. You just need somebody to space the floor to make sure that they have the room they need to operate. And Dennis Schroeder and Russell Westbrook aren't those guys.
Chris Biderman, thank you so much for joining us. Last one, Chris, and then we'll let you get to it because I know you're out there in Denver. Last one for you. Where do you think this goes next, right? DeMar DeRozan, and I was meaning to ask you about DeMar only playing 15 minutes. Did it feel like there was a reason for that? A lot of people said maybe DeMar doesn't want to be here anymore. We talked about it at the beginning of the show. Where does this thing go next? Could we be seeing some news break of DeMar maybe saying, you know what, we're moving in the direction of waiting for a move to be made and a trade to be made? Do they just start the young guys? Where do you see this going next? And what do you expect to see tomorrow night in Denver when it comes to a starting lineup and, I guess, minutes distribution?
Yeah, you know what? I really don't have any idea, to be honest, because the one thing I do feel like DeMar's not in a very good headspace right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was pretty clear. And, it's unfortunate because, DeMar has been so open about mental health, and obviously he wrote a book and he's been sort of at the forefront of the being vulnerable movement among athletes. And man, he came into training camp with just this like renewed mindset. He was like, last year was so terrible. It was such a grind on me mentally. And he said he did some things in the off season to really, address his mental health. And he came in feeling great about the season. And he seems like he's just back in that place where, back in that air of negativity. And he said, the uncertainty, like the question I asked was like, is the uncertainty with the roster stuff, like throughout for everybody, is that contributing to this? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. Like it's everything. It's definitely something that, is on his mind. The fact that like this roster doesn't seem like it's going to stick around, and it's impacting the way he's playing. And so, having a potential trade hanging over your head just doesn't seem like something that is jiving with DeMar. And it doesn't seem like it's helping. The fact that this is a transition period for the Kings, like feels like, it feels like it's hurting the entire roster, DeMar maybe more than anybody else. So that's definitely something that I think is contributing to this. In terms of what's ahead, I would a trade request from DeMar surprise me? Not at all. I'm not sure what his value is at this current point. I would expect that Scott Perry is, I know for a fact Scott Perry came into the season thinking 15, 20 games, we're going to evaluate this thing, see what we have, and then move from there. You're getting to that 20 game mark. Mm-hmm. And it's not looking great. So I would expect some moves to be coming. In terms of the starting lineup, I don't know. I would have thought Doug Christie would have pivoted away from the vets at some point, by now. I would have thought it would have happened by now, but it hasn't happened yet. So we'll see. I'll dig around tomorrow when the Kings have shoot around and obviously the game against the Nuggets. But it's interesting times in Kingsland for sure.
Did you get any good food out there in Memphis, or do you got any spots out? Because you're always on the road. Did you get anything in Memphis, or are you going to get anything in Denver? I mean, you got to get something out of this. You deserve this for what you're giving us. You deserve this, Chris.
Thank you. Gus's Fried Chicken. I know it's not, I think it originated in Memphis, but it's a chain throughout the South. I go there in New Orleans and Atlanta too. Mm-hmm. But there's a Gus's a few blocks from the arena there in downtown Memphis, and it's always great. But yeah, Memphis, I don't know, man. Memphis is not the food scene in Memphis. Like, I guess, I know people love catfish and those types of things. I don't want to say anything bad about Memphis, but I will say it's probably not my favorite food city.
Okay.
Aside from Gus's. I love Gus's.
I guess, you got the barbecue out there. But what about, is there anything in Denver that you got? Anything?
There are a lot of great restaurants in Denver.
They don't have like a cuisine though, do they?
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, the food's good. Like Denver's a cool city. A lot of good bars, a lot of good beer, a lot of good restaurants. There isn't like one particular.
You snowboard out there?
No, no. No, Alan.
I'm just catching, catch an early one. I don't know.
I'll see a friend tonight who lives in the area, and then I'll do the game tomorrow. But no, I'm not on vacation. I'm here to grind.
You got guys. You got to talk to these players about who's going to start. All right, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Chris Biderman, thank you so much for taking the time, man. We really do appreciate it. Be sure to check out all of Chris' work on the Sac Bee. Be sure to check him out on social media as well. It is always a joy when we get to read work done by Chris Biderman. He still owes me a tea time to show me how to stop my slice. Chris Biderman, thank you so much for joining us, man.
All right, man. See you soon.
Great stuff. Outstanding, man. What a show. What a show. And Chris Biderman, he was on top of it. He was in the building. Man, oh, man. I don't know if